Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
Welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have the pleasure of having Vaishali Nikhade with us. And she is an engineer who used to design computer chips, and she turned into a psychic. So she's a left brain engineer who transitioned to a right brain psychic. Getting nowhere after consulting herself 30 to 40 psychics, she studied and learned the subtleties of intuition. She helps clients overwhelmed with confusion and business challenges seek clarity. She once prevented a client from losing an investment of $150K in a bad venture, and another client to get a $35,000 raise for bidding a contract. And she has her own podcast called The Uncanny Link, where physics meets metaphysics, or science meets woo. So welcome, and I'm really looking forward to find out more about you and this whole journey, and how did this left brain become so right brain? Because, you know, it's interesting in healing, there is an art to healing and there is a science to healing. So in a sense, it's kind of a blend of both, though currently we're in an era where this sort of science thing is science, which is maybe not science, maybe it's more used for propaganda, is coming out. So it's very interesting, this whole understanding of what our reality is. So why don't we start with the question I ask everybody: what led you into this field? Because clearly it's to help people. And so I see the role of a psychic as a type of healer. And I want you to sort of explain, what was your path to this? What led you down this road?
That's such an interesting question. And it was a while back. There was no pandemic, and I was in a difficult situation related to work. And I wasn't really getting any answers, and I was trying to figure things out myself. So I said, why don't I just get help? And I decided to get help from psychics. And I called like one or two of them, and things didn't really resonate with me. So I said, maybe I'm just not calling the right people. I just need to kind of go and explore a little more. And the count started increasing, and it went to 10, 20, 30, 40. I think I must have consulted around 30 to 40 of them. And it was around that point that I kind of threw my hands up in the air and said, oh my God, these people have no idea what they're talking about. I need to figure this out myself. So I decided to learn it myself, and that's how I got started. I got started to kind of get my own answers and answer my own questions and get direction for myself. And once I kind of started things playing out, you have to understand I came from a scientific background. So for me, this was very I don't want to use the word esoteric, but it was a little like, does this really work? I had to have clear justifications that this was really working. So I did a lot of experiments, and I played with the readings for myself, and I played them in the span of a day. I wanted to make sure that they actually play out the way they did. And after some experimentation on myself, playing with it on a daily basis, there's a story where I actually had a straw that broke the camel's back moment, and that's when I actually transitioned. But it was mainly through experimentation that I learned how to read initially, and then I kind of started refining it, and then I started reading for other people.
So when you say reading, like, can you explain to those who might be less familiar with what is psychic compared to intuition? Because I think people understand intuition, although there's many theories of what that means. But what is the how do you see what psychic is compared to what intuition is, or are they the same for you?
Okay, cool. That's a very great question. It's funny, I was just thinking about doing an episode on my podcast for it. So here we go. So think about it as so we are all human beings, and as a human being, we are like a spirit in a body. So we have this body and we have these senses, which are our five senses. And then as a spirit, also we have senses. And the senses of the spirit are known as clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance. I'm sure you've heard at least one or two of them, but it comes from like clairvoyance is clear seeing, clairaudience is clear hearing, and claircognizance is clear knowing. So those are the senses of the spirit. So if you want to look at it in terms of difference between intuition and psychism, or the difference between an intuitive and a psychic, think of it this way, that let's say you're traveling from the plane and you close your eyes and you can kind of, you cannot see anything. So when you look down upon it, when you open the window and look down, you can kind of see that, oh, there is like housing area, there is land, there is water, and so on. So as an intuitive, you can kind of get an idea like that, you know, there's a vague impression of whether the thing is land, whether it's water, whether it's a housing area, that kind of a thing. As a psychic, let's say that you're sitting in the same plane and it doesn't matter whether the window is rolled up or down, but you can see through what's going on inside a house. You can see what's going on with a particular person. You can look at their face. You can look at their movements. You can say what's going to happen to them, say in the next 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and so on. So intuition is more of a vague impression, for lack of a better word. And a psychic can give you a very, very clear definition of what exactly is going to happen, how things are going to play out. So for instance, I'll just take a few general examples. For instance, you know, someone may say, you know, it doesn't feel right or something. That's the intuition, that it doesn't feel right. There's no justification as to why it doesn't feel right, and there's no meaning associated with it. Nothing about where or how the information came from, just the impression that, oh, it doesn't feel right. So they come to a psychic, for instance, they would come to me and say, you know, this doesn't feel right. So then I look at it and say, oh my God. So if it's a love reading or a love question, then I would say, oh, this person is sort of cheating. Now, in the case of the guy who had this $150,000 contract, so something in his gut said that something wasn't right, and he came to me and I said that the deal was like a fraud. So all he did was ask the person to produce his plane tickets, and the person wasn't able to produce that. So psychic can pinpoint the information and give the exact definition and like spot it exactly, whereas intuition, which all of us have, we can just kind of gauge at a higher level whether something is right or something is not right. So does that clarify it a little bit? I'm happy to get into more examples.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. No, that's a good example. It makes sense to me, but I have a further question. Doesn't feel right. You know, when people say doesn't feel right, is that intuition or instinct?
So it is both intuition, instinct. It's the same thing. So intuition, so depending on whom you ask, they may or may not say whether it's intuition or instinct, but it is really the same thing. So think of it like the universe or the cosmos is kind of giving you signals. And our body is the last thing that gets the signal. They usually come through the spirit. So as a spirit, you get the signal, and the senses of the spirit will tell you that, oh, something is off. And then it will give the signal to the body. So somewhere the body will recoil. So it could be different things. Someone may say, oh, I just had a bad instinct about it. Someone will say, oh, I felt sick in my stomach. someone will just say, I'll get back to you, which is like just another way of they need more time, but they kind of know something is off and they're not willing to push the button and start running. So it happens to different people in different ways. And I think that if we go back in our life, and if we look at some of the major decisions that we made, which actually triggered us into forward motion or gave us momentum, we'll probably be able to check that it was like a gut instinct. We acted upon it, and then we try to justify the decision as to why we should be doing something. Because our spirit already has the information. It knows that this is it, and it runs forward. And then at a body level, we try to say, oh, I should buy this because that, this, that, that. So we all try to justify it at a body level.
Now, I mean, I agree with the part that, you know, that's what the role of the prefrontal cortex is. We analyze, but we basically justify what would be a reaction, like an instinctual sort of reaction, where I don't know that I have the same opinion, as I've separated instinct from intuition. I see that intuition is the way your signals from the cosmos, but for me, instinct is more like gut based. And it's my premise that it's fear based, because for the first 7 years, we've learned to protect ourselves before we were able to analyze it. So sometimes we have an instinct, but the instinct is, let's say we live in a family that's very prejudiced, right? Then we might have an instinct, oh, that person is, we shouldn't hang out with them, or we shouldn't talk to them. But that's actually not true. It's because we were brought up unknowingly, unconsciously, with the instinct that we picked up from our surrounding to be guarded, against a type of person, right? So like, I think we learn these instincts based on fear, because we're actually, we're built to protect ourselves. That's kind of the first thing. So for me, I've sort of separated it between instinct and intuition, because I think intuition is something that we all have, but it becomes a freeing of the judgments based on fear. Does that make any sense to you? Or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so the instinct is actually just, for me, I believe that I think we are saying the same thing in different ways. The instinct is still intuition. Like you may get a gut instinct of, oh, I should go and call these people. And then, for instance, oh, I should pay my water bill. And then that's just an instinct, right? And then you call the water company, or you log in and you say, oh my God, today's the last day. If I didn't pay this today, then, tomorrow I would have to pay a fine or something.
Right. So it's a fear-based in that case, because you pick it up with your in gut, and they say a gut feeling is in the gut, right? And, the brain is in the gut anyways. So that makes sense. Then it turns out, we were right. But it's still a fear-based action. Like it's still, we can justify that we picked up, we listened to our body signals, but I don't know that I know of an example, and that's why I'm curious how you're thinking, of an example where instinct is not fear-based, even if it's right and it turns out to be, all of these things. But when is instinct not? Because that's how I've separated it in my...
Okay. I see what you're trying to say. So instinct, so one of the triggers can be fear. So in the case of the water bill, for instance, the trigger is, the fear is that if I don't pay this bill today and I pay it tomorrow, I'll have to pay the fine, right? So that could be fear of losing money, or fear of paying a fine. It could be either one. But you can also get an instinct, or it's just an idea or a thought which will say, that, oh, you need to go and meet this person. And then suddenly you go and meet this person, and it just opens like a whole new bunch of doors for you. So that could be one thing, which is also an instinct, but it's not based on fear. And you go and it actually opens a bunch of doors for you, and it completely changes your life.
So I would call that an intuition. So I think I've separated in my my experience the things that are fear-based reactions compared to listening, like as you say, to the cosmic universe, to the larger thing. Because when you say the example, somebody you have a thought, oh, you've got to meet somebody, there's no fear involved in that. It's purely, or, oh, my sister is going to call you, pick up the phone and she's calling you. Right? It's like, it's a preemptive, but there's no, that's what, for me, that's what intuition seems to me like. It feels more like that. So that's why the reason I'm debating this is because when you, and I like the way you define psychic, is a psychic basing themselves, like, how does it work in that they see what's, they see preventatively what you might either feel instinctually, but also can they see what you feel intuitively in this? Let's say if my, fear-based compared to, fear-based is so much easier to tell, because even you, like ourselves, if you realize it's fear-based, if you train yourself, you can start to realize, okay, there's an instinct here. Am I pushing it down? Am I looking into it? Am I doing the prefrontal, cortex? No, it'll be fine. Just negate, and it's not true. And yet it was really a problem. It really was something you should have paid attention to, right? But how does the psychic differentiate like that? What is in harm's way compared to what is, expansive opportunities that a person could miss? Like in business, you're constantly making decisions. You constantly have fears, fears that come up, right? Like, of course they do, right? Like, is my message clear? Is this, is that? Like, there's constantly potentially intelligent questions, but also limiting questions. But how does a psychic help you see the opportunities that come up?
Right. So that's a deep question. I wish I was taking notes because I could write down the points, but I'll try to go in, and if I missed any part of your question,
Sure.
then we can
I have a
move forward. So I just, it's funny you asked that because I just released like an episode on my podcast, and I kind of talk about it, like what's the difference in the senses of the body versus the senses of the spirit. And when we are dealing with a person or a human being or the human part of it, we are looking at our senses. We have our 5 senses, and if I have to look at you, then I just look at you and I see you. Now, if I have to look behind me, then I have to turn my head and see what's behind me, unless, of course, I have a mirror or a camera that sees behind me. And then if I have to look in the other room, then I have to physically walk there, unless, of course, I have a camera. I have to walk there and see what's going on in the room. So that's as far as our body senses are concerned. But as far as the spirit is concerned, the senses of the spirit, they do not have any bounds. They are not bounded by space, and they are not bounded by time either. So how would that work? So they're not bounded by space, which means that I can be here and I can look what's happening behind me without a camera. I can sense what's happening in the other room without having a camera, which is, I'm not bounded by space. So that is one example of not being bounded by space. And if we go back to the example of the plane where somebody was flying in the airplane, so technically you can sit in the airplane next to the window. It doesn't matter whether the window is open or closed, right? And I can literally, because I'm not bounded by space, I can literally go in and see what's happening inside this room and where I'm sitting, what I'm wearing, how I have my hair, what all is in the room, and so on. So that's the sense of the spirit, which is not bounded by space. And then the second part is the senses of the spirit, which are not bounded by time either. So this part is a little difficult to understand, but I'll try my best to explain it. So as far as we are concerned, we are kind of brought up in the notion that time is linear. That, you know, we have today, we had yesterday, and we'll have tomorrow. And if we look at it in that respect, then, you know, whatever happened yesterday, I can look because I kind of know what has happened yesterday. And what's going to happen tomorrow, I don't really know because tomorrow has not come yet. Now for a spirit, there is no time. What does that mean? It means that the spirit can see through the past, present, and future all at the same time. So if I can see through the past, present, and future, what could I potentially do? A lot of different things. So for instance, I'm just going to take the $150,000 example, or let's take the other one for the $35,000 contract. So this particular lady, she came to me and she was a little nervous because she was trying to bid on a project. And the project she was trying to bid on, she was going to put in a bid of like $225,000 or something. And she was nervous because she really wanted it badly. So you know what it's like when you want something bad. So I said, let me take a look. And I said, you could go up to like 260 and it would still get approved. And she put it at 260 and she still got it approved. So that's almost like stepping into the future, knowing what's going to happen, and then making a little bit of a correction to get, you know, whatever number I wanted. So that's just one example. I'll give you another one from my personal life. Back in February of 2020, I was debating whether or not I should go to a conference. And I had just come back from a conference, and it was just so much exhaustion and so much work to just come back, take a few days rest, and just pack and just go again to another conference, check into another hotel and eat food outside and so on. It was just too much work for me. And I was just debating, should I go, should I not, should I go, should I not? And I would look at the reading where I could kind of see through time and see what's going to happen. And every time I looked at it, it was like, you should go, you should go. There'll be a big network. You'll make a lot of friends. You'll meet new people and so on. And I kept dragging my feet. And every time I looked at it, it would say, you should go. So I said, okay, should I really go? So then I started to come up with a few excuses. I said, oh, I don't want to drive. I don't want to take the airplane either because it takes me a little bit of time to go to the airport, and then you go through security. It's like a big headache. So I said, what I'll do is I'll post in the Facebook group, and if I get someone to go with me so that I don't have to drive, then I'll go. If not, I'll just pass. So I make a post in the group, and sure enough, this girl tells me that, you know, you can just take the bus. That way you don't have to drive. So I took an overnight bus and I went there. And the only reason I went there is because I could see through the reading that it was asking me to go. And oh my God, it completely changed my life. It opened so many doors for me. And it wasn't just one door. It was one door, then the next door, and the next door. It was almost as though the universe knew what I would need. And it was like, you know, it's like going up a staircase. You go to the first step, second step, third step, and then it's, even to this day, all those doors are still opening. And I've never had that happen in my life. So think of what I would have missed had I just not gone.
So in that example, for example, the thoughts that come where you're saying like, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go to another, all the
Yeah.
complications and all that. So those are not, they're not instincts or they're not intuitions. They're self-sabotaging thoughts in this version of looking at it. Like you have an inner voice that's telling you also, or that's saying don't. And then you have a voice that is like, okay, why is this staying with me? Like, why? Hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just wanted to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health, and they're entertaining short videos, and you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you. Like, why am I? Because you bothered to go post in the group. It's almost like you were testing yourself, right? Like, if the universe shows me one more sign, then I'll do it, even though I have so much resistance. Like, how do you work with that, knowing, I mean, in hindsight, because the conference was fantastic and it opened windows, then you can say it was the right thing to do. But let's say there was a flood and the conference was canceled and you found yourself out in wherever and you couldn't, then you would say, well, I should have listened to my voice, all the things that said don't. So how do you sort that out? How do you learn to know which is the voice of reason and justification and which is the voice that is the spirit voice that knows that you should be going, and which is the self-sabotaging voices? I see like three voices. So how do you have that? How do you know inside you?
Okay, so deep down inside me, I already knew that if I went to this conference, things would change for me completely.
You
So
knew
because,
that. Okay.
Because I know how to read, remember, I learned to read for myself first. That was my main motivation to read. Because I know how to read, and because I probably have done like over 7,000 readings by now. I have done so many readings, I can literally see what's going to happen if I go versus what's going to happen if I don't go. So I can get like, just like being here, I can clearly see what's happening in front of me. I can see, by doing the reading, I can literally see what's going to happen if I go to the conference. And the reasoning behind that was very clear, that I should go. I was just dragging my feet because I was just tired and exhausted. Mm-hmm. So in a way, was I self-sabotaging? Yes. In a way, I was kind of tired and exhausted. I knew I should go. I knew what would happen if I go. And I also knew what would happen if I didn't go. So when I do those readings for myself, I actually look at two scenarios. So it's a way of verification or justification, or kind of making sure that it's validated from both ends. And I would see that what would happen if I go versus what would happen if I didn't go. And I can honestly say that when I looked at both those scenarios, it was like completely different. And I knew that I should go, but I was just kind of dragging my feet because I was just tired and exhausted, having just come from another conference.
Right.
So it turns out.
So I see then how you can tell, oh, I'm sabotaging, or there's thoughts coming from, too much energy, or etc. Right. The voice of justification in this case wasn't necessary in your case, because you were just dealing with, you knew that the voice of sabotage were voices of sabotage. You knew they came from this, because internally you could visualize the two outcomes. Yes. So is there a place in, and I know you've studied this obviously and you've practiced it, so I'm asking likely the impossible, but that's my nature. So I'm not used to impossible whatsoever. I believe in possibility all the time. But if one were to like, where would you know? Is there a part of your body or a space that you have access to where you know, like the word you know, I totally get that word. Where do you know that in a feeling way?
Cool. That's a great question. So I'll just lead you with another example because I think it would be just easier to understand
Sure.
with an example. So let's say that you are driving on a freeway and suddenly there's a huge accident, huge crash. And you ask 5 people, everything stops, the police come in, and the police are taking these witnesses and they're asking all these people and they're saying that, what did you see? So they asked the first person and the first person said that, oh my God, I heard such a loud noise. And that's all he can say. He's like completely shivering and all he's saying is that he heard this loud noise. Then you ask the second person, the police asks the second person and the second person says, oh my God, I just saw those 2 cars. I knew they were going to hit it. And they just kind of crashed. That's all he can say, that he just saw them and he knew that they were going to hit it. And then you ask the third person and he says that, oh my God, I felt so sick in my stomach and I just hit the brake and I heard a screeching sound. And then you ask the fourth person and he says that, I saw the spark coming out because of the 2 cars crashing. All of them are right. There is no right or wrong answer, but all of them are giving the police the information based on whatever sense they had was predominant. Somebody has their eyes as the predominant sense. So most of us have 5 senses, but someone may have their vision as the predominant sense. So they will see that, oh, I saw these 2 cars and the way they were going about it, I knew they were going to crash, or I saw a spark. And someone may have the sound as a predominant sense and they'll say, oh my God, I just heard a loud bang. So that's all at a body level. So now if we go let's just go to the same conference example and see how one would know as a spirit, like, how someone can decide. So just as we have these senses for the body, we also have the senses for the spirit. And someone may just see a vision that if I go to the conference, I'll meet these people or something, just like that. It's like an impression. It's just like, think of it like you're daydreaming. And think of it like when you're 18 or 20 years old and you're going out on a date and you really, really like the guy. Just close your eyes. Can you visualize the guy? So that's really what the clairvoyance or the clairvoyant sense would be, where you'd be just able to get an impression of what would happen if you go. Someone may have clairaudience as their sense, where they would just hear a whisper or hear a sound that, oh, if I go, then, maybe I'll meet this person on whose podcast I'll get and things will change for me. Or maybe I'll be able to get people as guests on my podcast. Or maybe I'll be able to sell my book if you have a book. Or maybe I'll be able to network further, whatever it is their demand is, but they just hear like a sound. And that's the clairaudience, which tells them that this is your trigger to move forward. And then there is the claircognizance, which is your knowingness. And for that one, you just know, like, I just knew that there was going to be an accident. There's no rhyme or reason. That's why I stayed home. For instance, the people who did not go to work at 9/11, they just knew that something was wrong, so they didn't go. And they can justify it by various means why they didn't go, but somehow they knew that something was off. Now, like I said, the difference between intuition and psychic, they cannot point their finger and say what's wrong until it happens. but the psychic can tell that, yes, this is it. There's going to be a crash or there's going to be a disaster. So with the claircognizance, you'll just know that this is it. And then at a body level, you'll try to justify why you should go to the conference. Does that help a little bit or not quite?
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, that really, that explains it very well. Brings up another question though.
Go for it.
The question I then have is, in entrepreneurship, we're often told, visualize what you want, because we create our own reality. So how does creating your own reality work with having seen as a psychic or somebody that tells you what your reality is? Like, how does that work together or not together?
Yeah. So that's actually a great question. The advantage of seeing a psychic or seeing through the future is that you kind of know what's going to happen. So now that you know what's going to happen, you can make a decision. And I'll just give a small example of real life and then proceed with another real life example. Okay. Let's say that I want to drive to the airport. I want to drive to the San Francisco airport, and I see that there's going to be an accident. So now that I know there's going to be an accident, am I going to go on my regular route because there's going to be an accident? Probably not. I'll just go on a different route. And if I hit the accident, which is I've kind of gone a little bit and now I see that, oh, everyone is stalled. So then I can still take the detour, take the next exit, take the detour, so that I can still get to the airport on time. And all this comes because I know that there's an accident. So either I check my GPS before I leave home, or I check my reading, which is another GPS, seeing through space and time. And I know that this route is going to be crowded for whatever reason. But the GPS is an example where you can actually see through space, but just in real time. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing, that once you know that there's going to be an accident, or even at the point you know there's going to be an accident, you can hit exit, and then you can take a detour and you can go on time and catch your plane. Now, in real life, this would work a little differently. If I know that I have to go to that conference and the conference is going to be disastrous, then I would hit detour or exit, and then I would either go to a different conference or do something else. And in real life, I'll give you another example of how this worked out. So I have this client who's been reading with me for like 6 years now, and she has a case. She has a case for a settlement, and her settlement was around like $50,000, and her finances are not in a good shape because the virus has hit, and there's a lot of other things going on right now. So long story short, her business isn't doing well either. So you can imagine that somebody getting hit with 50,000, that's a lot of money, like to pay in such a turbulent time, you know? So think of that as the accident on the freeway. Mm-hmm. So when she comes to me, she's like, I really don't want to pay this. What can I do? She said, I'm willing to pay 30. What can I do so that I can pay 30? So I look at it and I say, based on what I'm looking at, all you have to do is just wait. And she's like, just wait? I said, yeah, just wait. I just go with what I see. So she did not yield in to any pressure to sign on any documents, and she just waited, and she kind of played the time game in terms of waiting. And she never succumbed to any pressure from the attorney or anybody else, and she did not sign any documents. A few days back, she calls me and she said, oh my God, you're not going to believe it. They're down to 30. Now I want to make it lower. So that's how you can take advantage of being able to see through time. So yeah, is the future fixed? No, but if you know what's coming up, you can actually take steps to change it. Just like you had the freeway accident or you had the $50,000 settlement deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It's funny. It brings up something I was told quite early on as a child. And I was in Europe, and there was a person who took my hand, and looked at it. We were sitting sort of in a cafe, and then she said to me, and I was very young, like 9 or something like that. I can't quite remember the age, but she said, "Oh," which is a very shocking thing to say, because I remember that my parents ran after her to tell her to go away, and they called her a witch. But she said, "You're going to lose the sensation in half your body." Right? So she was talking about a stroke. Now that I'm a doctor, I understand the phenomena. And she said at 61, which was like quite a thing to have in your mind. Then I did a reading through. It was a horoscope type of reading, and it actually showed the same thing. So, and I did this years later, right? Like, because in fact, I did it because I wanted to have a different answer to the situation. And but it came out many years later as the same. So I'm not yet 61, but I'm going like, wow, it's a very, I would like to believe that it's not true, and I would like to do everything so that it can't be true, but I can't see anything in my life that would make it true, as in like I'm healthy, I'm eating well, but I know that strokes can happen differently, right? They can happen all kinds of reasons, right? So how do you deal with the imprint? Because when you said you went to 30 or 40 psychics that you knew that were not good, like I'd love to say, well, these were the 2 that I know are not good, but I don't know that that's true. How would you sort out for people who may have had an experience like that where they just don't want to hear it? I mean, because it's really hard to hold that belief in your imprint. So what would you say to that? Well, first of all, do you see it? Number one. and secondly, how do you deal with that kind of statement?
Yeah, so I'll go to the second one. Do I see it? I have too much light. I don't want to look right now and see what it is. But I think there's a way to deal with it. And the way to deal with it is to ask questions around it. See, you can never get a reading by just asking one question. All those people who are saying that I just want to know one question, I never do those kind of readings where you have just one question, because just one question is just a little bit of information. It gives you the landscape.
Right.
It doesn't really tell you the entire story. Just like the case of the car accident, if somebody said that I heard a loud bang, it could mean so many things. It could mean someone just slammed on their door. They were parked on the shoulder and they just slammed their door. That is a loud bang. Or somebody had a tire which burst out and suddenly there was a bang. Or there were 2 cars hitting, that could be a bang too. So you don't really know what it is. So the way to do it is actually ask validating questions around it. And if you ask 1 question, 2 questions, 3 questions, usually I take at least 3, and all the 3 of them support the same conclusion or theory, at that time you can conclude and say that yes, there was an accident. I heard this bang, I saw these 2 cars crashing, I saw smoke come out. There's a good chance that it was an accident. But if I want to know more, then I have to look a little bit more and get more information. And that's really how I approach my readings. I never really say this or that, but usually if 3 or 4 questions support the same thing, then you can come to the conclusion that yes, this is it. And then you ask overriding questions like, what can I do? For instance, let's go back to our freeway example. What can I do if I want to go to the airport on time? Number 1 is, if I start from my home and just see before that there was an accident or there's going to be an accident, I just take a different route. If I don't do that, and if I'm just stuck on the freeway, then, I just take the next exit. And that would be like, what can I do to get to the airport on time? And the third one would be, I just park my car somewhere and get an Uber. So all those questions just answer, what can I do to get to the airport on time? So in the same way, I've become like an expert at asking questions, and believe it or not, the left brain and right brain think differently.
Yeah.
And when most of the people read with me, the first thing I do is I just help them frame the question, because when I was younger, when I started reading, when I was younger, I would see that the reading would just show me what I asked. If I asked one thing, it would show me one thing. If I asked the other thing, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out, oh my God, I have to just rephrase the question. So I've just become an expert at reframing the questions, and based on how you ask is what you get to see, and then you can move forward from there.
No, it's an empowering, like, I actually didn't ask anything. This was a reading without a question for both cases. The first one was an offering, which the second one I literally asked, just give me what you see, so they weren't guided questions, but I like the idea that, in a sense, that process, now that this has come up, it's like, what's another way, or what can, if it were true, that's kind of the idea, then what would one do to change that destiny? Because it feels like it's only a destiny if you let it take over your life. If you end up going, okay, so there's something that was seen, and maybe it could be seen now or not, but the point is, if I've made choices that make it highly unlikely, then that's how I have an impact on the destiny that appears to be. Does that make sense like that? Is that?
Yeah, it does. But I'll just say this, that it took me a long time, to actually make these accurate predictions, and then to be able to turn them around. And when I saw that, it was like, oh my God. And it takes somebody who's really, really skilled to be able to overcome those kind of things. But it's not that they are not preventable. I think it just takes a little bit of tact and talent and intelligence, and a lot of luck as well to be able to find the right person who can help you out.
Right. Okay, well, listen, we're over our time, but this was such an exciting time or discussion, and we'll leave a link so that people who want to get hold of you can. And it's really brought up a whole bunch of questions. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this interview.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.